going there.
Yeah,
He's got a lot of money. It's very cheap. He loves it there. His wife's from there, I think, or his girlfriend.
that's what I've heard.
Hang on a second.
Ernest
Taking
Hemingway hung out quite a bit there.
Hang on. We're going. We are live on. Just so you know, we're live on YouTube. Right, folks. Let me put in. Hang on. All right. So I know we're live on YouTube, folks. Hang tight. We're recording live on YouTube. Bear with me, introduction here, Kenny. I'll do my best. Just making sure. 3, 2, 1. Hey, good evening, good afternoon, or good night. Not sure where you're at. If it's afternoon, morning, in the U.S. or around the world, thanks for joining us on Baseball Outside the Box. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo. Remember, it is the show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love the challenge of status quo. And remember, thanks for joining us on Facebook. Listen, today's guest, unbelievable. It's going to be a great show. You're going to love it. But on Facebook, you're not going to be able to see them. You're only going to be able to hear our guests. But on YouTube, you will be able to see both of us. Remember, the audio goes on baseballoutsidethebox.com. The video, subscribe to YouTube, baseballoutsidethebox.com, but go on YouTube, Peter Caliendo, hit the subscribe button, do us a favor, and then you'll get updates on all the shows. So we really want to thank you. Hey, let me tell you about today's guest. It's going to be awesome. Great friend of mine. Love talking to him. He knows so much about the game, but in life in general, he's done so much. Former Team USA pitching coach, former St. Paul Saints pitching coach, played in Mexico. And let me tell you, he was in the movie MoneyBall. He played Grady Fusion. We're going to get into that, but he was also in another 48 Hours. He was in Last Man Standing. He's been in a lot of sitcoms. Hey, the most popular one, which I really love, was the Geico commercial. I thought that was fantastic. He was in that. Very good. We spent some time in Japan together. We spent time in Australia. Love the guy. He's outstanding. Let me welcome from Moneyball, Kenny Medlock. What's up, buddy?
Pete, it's great to see you as always.
Hey, always a lot of fun. I enjoyed also talking off flying a little bit. We're always catching up on stuff. Hey, listen, let's tell everybody a little bit what you're doing now, because we're all kind of stuck in the coronavirus a little bit. I've been down for about 9 months.
Well, I still like to go out though batting practice. I try to keep myself in shape. I a lot of push-ups, sit-ups, ride my bike, and just trying to get through this interesting time that we're living in. And it is certainly an interesting time, that's for sure. So
it is, and as we look
making the best
behind you,
of it.
as I see behind you, we see the Braves playing the Marlins. You've been following the playoffs. What do you think about them so far?
Well, there's a silver lining with every cloud with this inconvenience of the baseball. I'm glad that we have baseball, since it is something that brings people together historically. I think maybe baseball might even learn from this and say, it's kind of fun now that we have 16 teams in the playoffs. We have a shortened season, which a lot of people have been calling for. And it would be an interesting thing to take some of the negative out of this and make a positive out of it. This is usually, lemons and lemonade type of thing. So when we think about, wow, we have 16 teams in the playoffs, and I've always said I hated the one game wild card because it doesn't help two cities. One city gets a game, one city gets a television. And I've always thought that, why go through a long season that starts in February with catchers and pitchers showing up and ends up going into November now. And all of a sudden, when we get to the most interesting and biggest games of the year, everyone's in a hurry. We have one game for a wild card, then we have a 5-game series, and then they go into a 7-game series. I think that what we're seeing right now is a lot of fun because you're seeing a 3-game wild card. The only thing different is it's kind of interesting to see the Oakland A's playing the Houston Astros in Dodger Stadium.
Yes.
But the very unforgiving crowds now, they're made out of cardboard. So, yeah. But if you can incorporate that, pardon me?
No, I would have played real well with cardboards, because less pressure for me.
A lot less booze, so they're very, very, very forgiving. But if we took the format where people were actually in the ballpark, it would be really nice to have a 3-game wild card. And then I never liked the 5-game series because a team that builds its team for a 162 game season, all of a sudden you're playing a 5 game, you can get down by a team that might have 2 good pitchers, and they get in the playoffs, and they all of a sudden get in a hole, and they could be eliminated in a 5 game series. So I always thought that the 7 game series was a better indication of an overall team strength and starting pitching and all the things that got them to the playoffs. So this could be something baseball could look at very seriously and say, it's kind of fun. More people get involved during the playoffs because they become extremely exciting, great games. People look forward to it. And toward the end of the year, what's helped baseball is, call-ups where they'll get kids from AAA and get them to get a chance to play in the big leagues. And a lot of the games don't mean as much except for the teams that are actually going into the playoffs. And a lot of times they lose an edge because they're already wrapped it up. They're getting kids coming up to play, and they lose that edge sometimes. So it's kind of like in college football where they'll play all the bowl games a month after the season ends. Well, after the banquets and everything else, you just kind of lose an edge. So I think it would really be nice to start the season a little bit later, have less regular season games, and then expand the playoff games where people have a bigger interest and the games mean a lot more. So we might even learn from this. We might take a positive out of it and add to the game that's already great. They're making some changes to the game that I really never wanted to speed games up whenever I was a kid. Boy, I loved extra inning games because I couldn't get enough baseball. And so now we got an extra inning, so they're going to put a guy at second base. Well, what if you got a shutout or a no-hitter or something like going? I don't think they really don't need to mess with the game too much.
And that's
expand
what
the playoffs,
and that's what and Kenny, that's what I want to get to, because I think you bring up some good points here. I'm going to give a shout out to Alan Embry, former Boston Red Sox left-handed pitcher.
Yeah, I remember him.
Big leagues. Yeah, he's on Facebook. He said he's telling me I look younger. Hey, Alan, just so you know, yeah, I may look a little younger, but what I'm doing is I'm working out a lot. I got nothing else to do right now, so all I'm doing is working out.
Right.
And you played professional baseball, and and folks out there, if you're on Facebook, you're not going to be able to see Ken Medlock from Moneyball, but you can go to YouTube at Peter Caliendo. It's live there going on right now, and interact with us. But one thing I wanted to bring up, Kenny and I met in 1999 with Team USA. There was a pro team that went to Australia for the Intercontinental Cup. Kenny, playing pro ball, since you're talking about, let's talk about some of the changes, some of the rules that they've made. Man on second, maybe not so popular. We used it in the Olympics. And I understand. I don't think that's going to carry over into the season. That may have just been used to save on pitching right now. What other rules did you not like or maybe like that was implemented this year?
Are you talking to me or Alan Embry?
No, Ken.
Oh, I don't like the way they have programmed pitchers to where the magical number. I remember asking when I managed, when do you know when to take a pitcher out? I said, well, usually the other team lets me know. As soon as they start hitting the ball, he's not effective, that's when you would do it. But mechanical efficiency has a lot to do with it. I understand they're trying to save arms and everything, but I don't think it should be micromanaged the way it is. And I also think that when you hire a field manager, that he should be able to make a lot of the decisions. And I know it seems to be a committee meeting right now where you have a lot of people that are feeding into this. So much data now, everything's data. And baseball has always been about numbers. People know how many home runs Babe Ruth hit or Barry Bonds, and people keep track of that. It's always been about numbers. So this is nothing new. But to manage a team and take that, I remember Tommy Lasorda my first year, he said there's 2 things you can do as a manager, a percentage move and a hunch move. And there's no guarantee that either one's going to work. So it'd be nice to let the field manager do more of managing and when I managed up in the Northern League, I remember the first meeting I had, I said, I'm going to give the game back to you. You're going to put your own pickoffs on. I'm not going to sit there and call pitches. I'm not going to take the game away from you, because I think that if you play the game between your ears and you develop those instincts, the game is much better. That's why you look back at the golden era of baseball, you had people certainly that the bodies were not as good because they didn't have the technology and working out and eating and all the other stuff. But the instincts, I believe, were a lot better when you give the games, and even at the youth level, going to a little league coach saying, "I called a good game today." Why don't you? Why did I figured out when I was in little league? If I threw a ball down the middle of the plate and got hit over the scoreboard, I better not throw it there again. So develop those instincts and give the game. I always believed when I was coaching that the practices belong to me and the games belong to the players. And you certainly have to have game management. I'm not saying that, but don't be so involved in it that you're taking the game away and all of a sudden someone's out there. I've seen guys taken out of games with no hitters because they have 100 pitches. So those are some things. Hurrying the game up. I think that that's a mistake when you have a close ball game and all of a sudden now, because it's an extra inning and they're in a hurry to get it over with, they put a guy at second base thinking it certainly is going to speed the game up because you're putting someone in scoring position. I'd rather see a team get a guy on base and get him to second base somehow and get him in. So
What about,
like I said, it hurts the pitcher. I think it hurts the game.
what about the rule where you have to pitch the three pitchers? Now or three hitters, excuse me. Now you've seen it. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that also takes strategy away. I remember we go back to the World Series between the Twins and the Dodgers, and Walter Alston had a choice that everybody would love to have to either pitch Koufax or Drysdale. And so he pitched Sandy Koufax on 2 days rest and said, I did that because I had Don Drysdale behind him. So if the Twins put in their right-handed lineup for a left-handed pitcher, I could counter with Don Drysdale, and then I could come back with Ron Peronowski. And so you take a lot of the managing away when you have to come in and face three people. So I might not want to face three people. I might want to have a left-hander, a right-hander, and a left-hander. And one of the managerial moves is being able to make sure that you have those people ready. You might have them on the roster, but the worst thing in the world is to walk out to the mound and you don't have a pitcher ready because you didn't foresee this. Where a manager has to say, who am I going to compete against 2 innings down the road? Who is that manager going to counter with a pinch hitter? Who do I have to counter that? And you have to have your pitchers ready. That's a whole different form of managing, and that element is taken out of the game when you're going to bring someone in, and you have to face 3 hitters. Well, I think that takes away strategy,
Great point.
It affects the game.
No, I want to go back to something you said earlier, micromanaging, because especially with young kids, the game seems to be changing a little bit. Maybe it's just my impression, but it seems like, young kids, they don't get a chance to play the game on their own. Like you said, they can't make decisions. Everybody's telling them what to do all the time, when to go on to an extra base, when to do, just think on your own. You don't see that a lot. Do you think that's hurting the game in the long run?
I absolutely think you're taking the game away at an early age. And it also, it's a really fun game. I mean, growing up as a kid, my little league coach made out the lineup, and that's the last we heard of him. He wasn't sitting there in the dugout calling pitches, and we didn't hit 14. So the message was, if you're good enough to play, then you play, and if you're not good enough to play, then we'll get you in when we can. And the messages get better in terms of giving the game back to them. Do your coaching during practice, not during games. I used to take a notebook and I'd write down things that we didn't do, even at the college and professional level. And then I would get the team and say, I didn't do my job as a coach or a manager because I didn't prepare you to do this. So in practice, that's what we're going to work on. And the message to kids, let them call their own games. When I was at Cal State Dominguez Hills, the head coach there, George Wing, said, I really have a hard time with a 18 or 19-year-old kid calling a game. I said, why? He's throwing the ball. I mean, sit there with the catcher so you two, are on the same page. And certainly you give them feedback. You'll see guys with a slow bat and say, you want to make sure we don't give somebody with a slow bat off-speed pitches or pitches that's going to speed his bat up if you can overpower him. certainly you give them feedback, but you don't take the game away from them. Instincts are always a better player. When you have a smart player, you have a better team. You know, I can look back at some of the Boston Celtic team and I see a guy like Bill Russell who really made that whole team good. And if you looked at the individuals on that team, they were certainly solid, but they weren't as gifted as some of the other teams that had superstars that didn't win. Bill Russell made that team play as a team. So when you can develop that kind of mindset in practice, especially in youth baseball, let them have the game. I mean, would you stand over a kid that's playing a PlayStation and tell him, push this, push that, push this, push that? Pretty soon he's going to throw it away. He's going to, that's no fun. You know,
Exactly.
let the kids have the
Great
game.
Point.
They'll figure it out.
Great point. I love to hear that. Listen, the other thing is, I know you've been a pitching coach a long time. I remember just watching one of the playoff games. You know, the catcher, you know, I understand they have a game plan going in, how they're going to pitch to certain guys. But the catcher put down a sign, he shook it off. Catcher put down the sign, shook it off. 3 times he put down the sign, the pitcher shook it off, but finally went with the catcher. Well, guess what happened? The guy hit a double down the line. You know, there's a fine line there. Who isn't? I mean, finally, shouldn't the pitcher make that final decision? He's the one that's going to throw the pitch. If there's a difference between both of them.
I had that happen to me when I was with the Angels. I came into a game and my catcher, Greg Dean, kept putting down one. Now, I'd been in the bullpen for 6 innings up and down. And I come into the game, my best pitch, my idea of challenging someone is my best pitch. And so I knew what I wanted to throw. And I always felt the subliminal factor is if you're throwing something and you don't feel good about throwing it, chances are it's not going to be successful. So I used to always I had catchers that would say, I'm calling my game. And I said, well, you know something, when the win and loss goes behind your name, we can do that. But, you know, the win and loss goes behind me. So I'm going to throw what I feel comfortable with. Is it always going to work? No. Maybe he sees something. So I would always call out and say, okay, what are we thinking here? What are we thinking? You know, and people, you can't text each other in a game. So you really have to communicate. You have to talk. Absolutely. So I always encourage the catchers and the pitchers to sit with each other and go over so they know what page. Usually a good catcher knows what is working, what pitch is effective, and everybody else does too. There's no big secret that certain pitchers have certain out pitches, and then people know it. So I say develop the instincts early on. The youth coaches that do a great job, because don't forget, they're not getting paid either. They're putting time in, and it's maybe they have that kid inside of them that baseball brings out in all of us, but we got to let Puff have the magic dragon. You know, it's not your game anymore to play. It's your game to pass on and create a place for him. I always thought it would be funny to remember the Little Rascals growing up. I used to love the Little Rascals. They had their little clubhouse and they had their little meetings and hitting the gavel, and Spanky and Alfalfa would make rules. It would really be fun to have Little League so that when the game started, the adults had to get off the field. You had kid umpires, kid announcers, kid players. There's some
love
kids are maladroit that maybe can't play, but they love the game, and they go into baseball as administrators or front office people because they have a love for the game. They just didn't get the genetic inheritance that some of the guys that are a little more gifted and have more gears. Doesn't mean you can't be a part of the game. So it would be kind of fun to have that kind of a Little League where the whole thing is actually the adults actually would have to create it for them, but don't take it over. Let them have it.
I love that idea. Matter of fact, you know, as you say that, I'm thinking, you know, you're always trying to find positives in something really negative right now with the coronavirus. One of the positives, as I ride my bike, what I'm seeing is 5 kids playing wiffle ball out in the park, 7 kids playing with a ball on their own, playing baseball. No adults around. Lots of learning going on, lots of fun happening. I think that's a positive. Hey, listen, I want to get your opinion because I think
when you're riding a bike as a kid, what's the first thing that has to happen? Your dad puts training wheels on it, right?
Yeah.
Once the training wheels come off, let the kid ride the bike.
I'm on my own. Exactly.
Right. Do that with baseball.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the other part I want to ask you, because the game's changing a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with change if as long as it changes for the positive. You've got a lot of velocity right now going on. It's all about velocity, and but what about the control, the balance between velocity, control, location? Because we don't seem to be stressed in location and off speed pitches. We're stressing more velocity only, and that could be detrimental. Talk about that. What your thoughts are?
Well, we can look back historically at great pitchers that are in the Hall of Fame. I remember in the 60s, the winningest pitcher in the 60s, which was a pitching rich generation. You hear Bob Gibson, unfortunately, passed away the other day, and Drysdale and Koufax. The guy that won more games in the 60s than anybody was Juan Marichal. And here's a guy that threw about 9 different pitches at different speeds. So it's not how hard you throw, it's how hard you are to hit. So whenever you listen to a hitting coach that's coaching, they talk about get a good pitch to hit, have a game plan, know what the other guy's throwing and everything. I had one kid that was at Sioux Falls in the Northern League, and his father was a major league hitter. And he kept swinging at balls in the dirt. And I said, what are you looking for when you go up there? And he goes, I'm looking for his split. I said, why? You can't hit it. You're taking fastballs down the middle of the plate because you're looking for a pitch you can't hit. So you have to have a game plan as a hitter. And the same thing holds true with a pitcher. So if you're just going out there, we'd all love to throw. I don't think velocity has ever been as high as it is right now. You could take great pitchers from different eras and put them here and not miss a beat. But it wasn't about let's sign you by how hard you throw, because there's kids, as you know, that we run into that have great arms, but location has a lot to do with how effective you are as a pitcher. Juan Marichal, to me, was just the quintessential pitcher that had great control, change speeds. That to me was the art of pitching. We used to say the difference of throwing and pitching. And so it's another fan friendly thing. When people want more sensationalism, it's not hitting the home run, it's how far did it go, the velocity off the bat. I didn't need to know the velocity off the bat. I could pretty much know when someone hit a ball out, and I knew when I had good stuff and I had pinpoint control. And I knew that some of the worst games I ever had was when I felt real good in the bullpen and thought I could overpower people. So if you don't have the kind of stuff that can overpower, I don't think anyone throws much harder than Chapman does. But if he throws a ball in a bad area, it can get hit.
Yes.
So I'm a big believer in the art of pitching. We'd all like to throw close to 100 miles an hour. Sure. Don't get me wrong. But most people on the planet don't do that. So the pitchers in the Hall of Fame, you can look at Bob Feller. I understand that threw real hard. And then the big train. If you look at Walter Johnson, I think his fastball probably equates to about 83, 84 miles an hour today, based on how they measured that. But that was big velocity back then, and a dead ball era. Bob Feller probably threw close to 98. I don't think they had a gun when Koufax played, but he threw real hard. There were guys that threw hard. There were guys like Kurt Simmons and Marichal, guys like that didn't throw real hard, but were extremely good pitchers. Even a manager wanting to bring a guy in that throws a sinker ball because he doesn't need a hard thrower. He needs someone that can throw a heavy fastball that get a ground ball. And that's a strategy, knowing I got a sinker ball pitcher that throws 83 miles an hour, but the bottom drops out, and I'm going to get a ground ball out of this guy. So I'm going to utilize that talent. So there's a lot of colors in a Crayola box. Just not label it to one.
Hey, let's look at Facebook real quick. Chuck Fix says hello, Kenny. And also, guys and gals on Facebook, you're not gonna be able to see Ken. In order to see Ken, you got to go to YouTube at Peter Caliendo to see both of us. Right now, Facebook is just me. Sorry, you got to look at my face only. And then Zach Manassian, I think Zach. I was Kenny's first clubby in Ogden in 1967.
First clubby, I love Zach. Yeah,
absolutely. I remember, and he's also a clubby in the big leagues with the Rangers.
Yeah, for a long time. When I was in Texas, I came in and saw him, and they had a big storm coming. He gave me a jacket and everything. Zach was the closest to my age because I was one of the youngest guys on that team in Ogden when I signed, and Zach was just a good guy. I always liked Zach, and that was a great experience, and he was part of that great experience there.
Well, he's on Facebook. He's always on. I see him all the time. And matter of fact, I've got to get him on the show, Zach. We got to email each other. We'll get you on the show. Listen, let's take one question here. Jacob Medina asks, and this is always a common question. It comes up a lot, as you know. 11-year-old kid throwing a curveball. He wants to get your opinion on that.
I think that mechanical efficiency is a very important factor. And I would say that one of the biggest threats to a kid's arm is not so much a curveball, because no one pitch is any more harmful than any other pitch when it's thrown properly. I would say the mounds have a lot to do with it, because when you start playing games at 8 a.m. and you play all day, and it's great, all these kids are involved, but then you get the big hole in front of the rubber, you get a big hole you land in, you're throwing on an uneven surface or a mound that's not really put together real good. I think that probably can contribute to arm problems more than a given pitch. So I would say you definitely need mechanical efficiency so that one pitch doesn't hurt you any more than another. Kid that throws real hard, more foot pounds per pressure on your arm, with bad mechanics, he can hurt his arm just as easily as a curveball.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're seeing.
One pitch is any worse than any other pitch when it's thrown mechanically efficient and you have a good surface to throw on. It's very important.
Ken, that's a great point, because if you think about it, we get a lot of great players coming out of Latin America, but sometimes a lot of these young kids, they've got great fastballs, but then you look at what you called their, movement efficiency is not really good. And then you see a lot of young players getting hurt because of that.
Or a bad mound. I mean, I've seen mounds that were built where it's a plateau, where it's not built properly. And you'd never think of making the bases 89 feet instead of 90, but the mounds are not always I remember starting a game, a playoff game, and the first pitch I threw, I sunk in the soft dirt that I landed in. It was like pitching at the beach or a plateau mound. It's like throwing over a log, and those kind of mounds are bad. I remember taking a golf class in college, and they had a verbal final, and the teacher asked, "What invention do you think changed the game of golf and improved the scores more than anything?" And people were going, "Oh, the balls are much better," which they are. The shafts are much better, the bigger head, all that. Talk about the clubs and all that. I said lawnmowers, because lawnmowers make you putt on a putting green that's like a rug, where they used to put sheep out there and eat the grass. So with the invention of lawnmowers, you had a much better fairway, you had much better greens. It improved the game. Once again, the surface you play on has a lot to do, and especially with a pitcher, it's probably the least amount of that's talked about. But bad mounds are more responsible for hurting arms than a given pitch, I think.
It's interesting you say that, because, you've watched some Japanese pitchers come over from Japan. Now, obviously, they overthrow a lot there, but they train a lot better than we do. What's interesting is the mounds there are softer, and they've noticed that right away. The mounds in Japan are a little bit softer, where the mounds in the U.S. are really packed hard. So that's interesting you bring that up.
Not only packed hard, but shaped correctly. In the rule book, it says it should slope 1 inch per foot for 10 feet and 4 inches in front of the rubber. So when you have a plateau where it's flat, and you see that in a lot of high schools, they'll have the people that build the mounds are the same people that maintain the fields. And if they don't build the mound specific, and they got a plateau up there to throw off of, it's supposed to be a mechanical advantage. That's why we throw off of a mound. It's supposed to be an incline. But if it's not built properly, it's remember when Jose Canseco came into a game to pitch, and he hurt his arm because he wasn't used to throwing off an uneven surface. The pitcher is the only position in major sports where you're playing on uneven ground. The human body is not designed to be on uneven ground. And so the mound is critical in terms of efficiency. Some ballparks even build their mounds so if their pitching is not their strength, they build a mound so the pitcher seems to get everything up, because it's not so much his release point. His release point's determined by where his feet land. Ground force is the key factor that's invisible for everything we do. Everything works off of ground force. Think of putting a batter. Remember when we were in Australia, they didn't have the dirt right. Everything was loose. So guys were in the batter's box and it felt like they were in the beach. If you ever watch an over the line tournament at the beach, the first thing they do is they spin their feet to get solid ground. So you can do that with swinging a bat and lose power. But if you're throwing, you'll hurt yourself on a bad mound. So,
and that reminds me, you've got I've seen outfielders, sometimes come in the pitch, and maybe from the outfield they throw, 89, then they get on the mound and they throw 81. Is that the ground force issue there?
it's a ground force thing. I mean, they'll stop a game when it rains, not because your head's wet, it's because you're slipping. You have bad footing.
Yeah.
You can't run. You can't get out of the batter's box. And more importantly, the pitcher starts throwing and starts sliding or not landing properly. That's when you can really hurt your arm. So there's an indication there, not because you're wet, it's because the ground force is not good and you don't have good footing.
Ken, at the same time, since you're on that, let me just hit on this. When it comes to pitching, for our coaches, so if you're talking ground force, that means that front foot, when it lands, it has to land before you actually throw the pitch. So that way both feet are on the ground to get the most force to go forward.
Well, both feet have different directions. There's two different motions. The back foot is probably the most important part, because that's where you have the mound, which is the equivalent to a starting block for a pitcher. So the back leg pushes linear to the catcher. When the front foot hits, your body rotates, and you can't go linear and rotational at the same time. So they're both equally important. So when that front foot hits, it's actually what you want to look at is the position of the ball in your hand when the front foot hits, because your body's going to rotate. So if the ball is too far away from your body when that front foot hits or down, you're going to leave the arm behind, because the front foot is for rotational components to start. The back one is for linear. And so they're both equally important. So you could look at the front like the pole of a tether ball. So that's when the body rotates around that. So even a hitter hitting off the firm front side, the same thing holds true. A pitcher's got to plant that front foot before he rotates.
Talk to, I remember you and I spending some time together in Chicago, and you were working with a pitcher and you were using a string to align I believe the pitch. Talk to our coaches about why you used that string, how you used it.
You're talking about the hitter, right?
Was it the hitter that you were using a string for?
It was the hitter. I was saying, we very seldom do we get a chance. We see the ball coming at us, and like every object, it falls at a uniform rate of 32 feet per second squared. I don't care if you're shooting a 50 caliber machine gun or dropping a baseball. The minute that ball leaves your hand, it's going to start to decelerate. So there is a slight 5 degrees or more, depending on the pitch, of course. So I used to like to say, okay, let's see how long you can keep the bat in the contact zone. So I would take a string out to where the pitcher would release the ball and run it to the catcher and have someone stand behind him.
That's
so you
right.
actually can look down the string and say, okay, here, let's make it real easy. Walk away from your hands and don't let your left eye go left. That way you could look down the string and see it. And when you start to swing the bat, stay along the string line as much as you can, which is your contact zone. Yeah. So it eliminates the swinging down and hitting the top of the ball and making it rise and a lot of other things that you hear that's just absolutely ridiculous. Because the more you can keep the bat in line with the flight of the ball, the better chance you have of making contact. And so the string just gives you a visual that you don't usually get a chance to have. It's a great little teaching tool, just so that you can say, let's see you swing down through, and it's a slight uppercut, just like the plane of the ball.
Yeah. And matter of fact, because we tell young kids, stay through it as long as possible. And with this string, it actually teach them how to stay through longer.
Yeah, it's a visual. It doesn't lie to you. If you're doing this, obviously your contact zone is a couple of inches. When you're doing this, you have a much better contact zone, 18 inches. So it's much better chance of making contact with the ball.
And folks, like I said, you'll be able to see Ken on YouTube. You can see the visual part. I think you understand most of it, but in case you want to see the visual, go to YouTube, Peter Caliendo. It is there, and subscribe for all our new shows. Ken, the other thing is when you pitched, it'd be interesting to find out, a lot of times as a pitcher, you also have to identify and know the hitter's swing. Were there telltales that that told you certain hitters, maybe you threw a pitch and they swung and you saw something they did, as a pitcher, maybe in batting practice or on tape, that you then made an adjustment on what type of pitches you were going to throw?
I would usually look at the hitter because the hitter pretty much tells you what he wants. A guy that usually stands straight up likes the ball down. He likes to look down at the ball. You've seen hitters that stand upright. Remember, George Hendricks comes to mind. Guys that stand straight up usually like the ball down. Guys that got down like Pete Rose usually likes the ball up a little bit. A guy on top of the plate or real close to the 6-inch line, he likes the ball inside. He usually has trouble with the ball away. And the guy that stands away from the plate usually has trouble with the ball that's in on him. And he likes maybe the ball away from him to go that way. So they usually, if you put a ball on a tee, you'd watch a hitter walk up there and address the ball, and he'll stand according to how he wants to hit that ball. So when a guy would walk up to the plate, I would usually gauge that, but I still had one rule. I would want my best pitch to be thrown. Sometimes I wouldn't throw him my best pitch in an early part of the game because I knew that later on in the game I might want to use that pitch. So hitters log in what you throw, and they don't hit what you throw, they hit what they see. So if you can change eye levels and speed, if I don't know a hitter or if I do know a hitter, I want to make sure that I'm not going to throw the ball where he wants it. So that's what all good hitting coaches will tell. Get a good pitch to hit. You don't see people doing their tee work and putting the ball on the outside corner down around the knees, because that ball is a tough ball to hit.
Hey, how would you deal with the shift nowadays as a pitcher? You're the pitcher, and there's a lot of shifts going on, obviously, and guys are hitting balls into those shifts. How would you deal with that as a pitcher?
I've always been interested in these shifts because the shift is going to be as efficient as the pitcher giving a guy a ball to hit. So if I have a dead pull hitter, a guy that really is someone that pulls the ball a lot, I'm not going to throw him away. So they're asking you, this is where his strength is. He pulls. So am I supposed to throw the ball inside so he can pull? Because he may hit the ball where I can't put people and the bleachers.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to pitch to his strength because we have a shift there. I'm still going to say, if this guy likes the ball in, even though we have a shift and he has a tendency to pull, I would rather maybe shade them that way. But I think the defense and the pitchers have to be on the same page as far as how you're going to pitch certain people. I wouldn't throw Barry Bonds in. I remember when I was up at St. Paul, Darryl Strawberry signed with the Saints, and I was at Madison, and we had a kid named Dan Kissinger that had a real good arm. And I said, do not try to get cute and throw the ball in on him down. Do not do it. And I guess in science and in baseball, one knows nothing till one experiments. And he did, and Darryl hit one over the trees about 490 feet. And he came in, he goes, I see what you mean. So.
Yeah. But then the shift should really be according to where you're pitching. Yeah, but you don't. Yeah, you don't see that.
But by the same token, if I'm hitting and all of a sudden I see everybody shifting over, I'm going to say, well, he's going to throw me, if I'm right-handed, he's going to throw me away because that's where they're shifting. So you're letting the guy know. And as a hitter, I would rather know if the ball was in or away more than anything else. The off-speed stuff, yeah, great. I'd like to know if it was a curve or a slider or whatever, but I would want to know if they're going to pitch me in or pitch me away. So when I'm hitting and I see them all shift over, I'm going to think, if I'm right-handed, I think that they're shading me to hit to the ball to the right side. I think he's going to throw me a lot of these sliders or balls away from me. He's not going to pitch me in because there's nobody here if I pull it.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much, it's like letting the hitter know, this is where we think you hit the ball most of the time. So this is where we're going to continue to pitch you. And you're pitching to his strength. so that you can make the shift work. I don't believe in pitching to their strength.
How about nowadays? You're seeing, and I think because of velocity and they call it spin rate, you're seeing more guys pitching up high. I know a lot of hitters are being taught launch angle, which you plainly said very, I mean, easily, you know, launch angle. I mean, that's just basically the angle of the bat that's going to be on the same path of the ball. We get that, but now you're seeing these guys pitch up high and they're not making, either they're going for that pitch and they shouldn't, or they're not making the adjustment. When you pitched, were they pitching more low at that time? And now
Well, they were teaching you to throw the ball down. But once again, if a guy's a low ball hitter, you don't want to throw the ball down.
Right.
So specifically, you want to have enough control where you can throw the ball under a hitter's elbows. Every hitter's got a hole. Every good hitter has a hole. And I remember Barry Bonds used to work out at UCLA quite a bit, and he had a routine where he would take a glove in his left hand and have the pitcher throw, and he would just stop the ball. And he would never go outside of that. He would just stay right there if it wasn't there. And here's a guy that had great plate coverage, did not come out of his zone. I mean, the year he hit 73 home runs, he walked over 250 times, which, wow, you know, is amazing when you're hitting the ball, hitting a home run every 12, 13, 14 times at bat. Do the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But short swing, definitely up on the bat, the whole thing. I do that with a lot of hitters too. I said, you know, look at the balance on the bat. You want the bat to be comfortable, so you don't want to be way down on the knob, down at the end of the bat, because it's heavier down there. You know, some of the best hitters that ever lived come up on the bat a little bit, and just to balance the bat and feel comfortable there. But the pitching part of it is you have to pitch. Certainly not so fine that you start getting behind, because that's the worst thing you can do, is try to nitpick corners and fall behind. Don't give the guy too much credit. Hitting is still a hard thing to do, and it makes it much harder if a guy can change speeds rather than just going out there and throwing the ball with your hair on fire, even though we have some pitchers that can pitch up because they have that kind of velocity. It's hard to catch up to it. It looks good, but it's hard to get to.
Right.
But
love it.
Again, it depends. If a guy's a high ball hitter, you don't want to throw the ball high.
Right.
You might climb the ladder. I mean, the whole thing is how disciplined the hitter is. And there are, I thought Edgar Martinez is one of the best hitters that, I remember seeing. And here's a guy that would train his eyes. He would turn the machine up as high as it would go, and it would be the equivalent reaction time to 110 or 120 mile an hour fastball. And he would sit there and just track the ball with his eyes. And then he'd get into a game, and the guy throwing 93, 94, 95 miles an hour wasn't overwhelming because he had trained his eyes. There's another thing that people neglect. You have to see the ball. And also what goes on in a hitter's head is very important. Just like a pitcher, I say, if you have a negative thought, a catcher's calling a pitch you don't want to throw, step off, regroup, because your body aspires to do the last thing in your subconscious mind. So if you're thinking negative, I'm going to miss this 2-foot putt. I'm going to miss this putt. Back off and regroup it. Step off the mound. For a hitter, it's the same thing. That's why you get the people to step out, stay down, get a good pitch to hit, all that stuff. When people come out of the zone and they're not disciplined, then it helps a pitcher to know that, well, I can throw the ball and climb that ladder and get a little bit higher because he's going to keep chasing it. But a lot specifically has to do knowing the hitter, knowing what the hitter's strength is, and then trying to stay away from that. You still have to challenge people every now and then. You still have to throw the ball over the plate, but you can help yourself quite a bit. It kills me every time a guy hits a home run. Well, I made a mistake. Well, what is he not supposed to throw the ball? Didn't make a mistake. He threw a ball and the hitter did a good job. He hit it. That's what happens. Some of the best pitchers, the best control pitchers, give up the most home runs. But I'd rather have a guy give up a home run than to walk 2 or 3 people and give up a double and clean the bases, because you're trying to be too fine and giving the hitter too much credit.
That's why I love talking.
Guys that can kill you. Those are the guys, you don't let them beat you.
That's why I love talking to Ken Medlock, man. We could keep going with the baseball part. Hey, I want to jump the money ball because I think this can be important also. But before I do, one other thing, when you didn't have video and other things to analyze hitters, did you watch batting practice as a pitcher? Did you watch batting practice, and did that help you in understanding someone's swing?
Absolutely. I would always want to watch the other team hit. And even when I was coaching, I remember taking the pitchers and putting them in the bleachers right, before anyone came in the ballpark. And I said, now, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit here and watch the coach out there throwing batting practice, and we're going to take 10 swings. I've always looked at baseball in terms of 10. It's not what you do in one at bat. It's what you do in 10 at bats over the course of a year. It's not what you do in one game. It's what you do in 10 games. So I would sit back and say, okay, we're going to play a little game here. You guys sit here and chart, and you spend more time talking to each other and charting pitches instead of understanding here in batting practice where a coach is out there throwing the ball and a hitter is working on his hitter. Let's see how many balls he can actually square up and hit line drives out of how many pitches. So you have the advantage. I remember putting a quarter in the middle of a baseball and say, if you can make the hitter hit around that quarter, you're going to make a lot of money because you're going to get pop-ups and ground balls. And the higher up you go in baseball, you get people to catch ground balls. And if the ball doesn't go out of the ballpark, a fly ball is an out. So the challenge is hitting the hitter has to hit the ball probably the size of a quarter right in the middle of the baseball. So as a pitcher, if you can get the guy to hit around that or change speeds, and that's changing speeds and eye levels, I still believe is the best way to pitch. But certainly I used to like to watch the other team hit. And I would actually do that with pitchers and say, let's see what they hit in batting practice. And you'd usually get about 400, about 4 out of 10 guys would hit the ball, square it up, and hit the ball real good. And so say, this is your advantage. I mean, if you were on the playground and a bully came up to you and you looked at him and said, hey, I got one of my guys behind you and 7 behind me. What do you want to do? So you so
folks,
I think it's always good. Knowledge is always a good thing to incorporate with the physical. There's 4 basic parts: the physical, the mechanical, the nutritional, and the mental. And the mental is something that you continue to learn. You continue to grow. Nutrition is a very important part. What to eat before a game, how to, keep your body. They used to say, how did you know how to hydrate yourself? I drank when I got thirsty, so real concept there. But usually the formula was for every 15, 20 minutes of work, a cup of water, so those 4 elements, which we equate that to a car. Which wheel can you do without? The mechanical is important. The physical is important. One thing I had against summer baseball and youth baseball is they play games, but they don't do the conditioning. And the conditioning is a commitment to being a pitcher. You have to condition your body. And a lot of times, why do we have coaches? To make us do what we're not capable of doing on our own. That's why we have coaches. So if you are intrinsically motivated enough and disciplined enough to do like a Herschel Walker did and say, I'm tired of people making fun of me. And he actually built himself. He actually committed himself to doing 1,500. To this day, he says he still does 1,000 push-ups a day and 1,000 sit-ups a day. It's amazing. Wow. And in doing that, it's like, do you have a wishbone or a backbone? I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you can learn to work as hard as you play, then you got a good chance. And the key is you look in the mirror and you never, as a kid, compare yourself to someone else. I want to be as good as them. Even a major league player, what you do is you say, am I as good as I can be? If you can look in the mirror and say, I have done everything I can to be as good as I can be, you are a success. Because like I said, we all strive for perfection, but sometimes we just don't get there. Some guys just have more gears, but there are guys with less gears and more between their ears, and they become pretty good players, with a guy that's got a body by Fisher and a brain by Mattel.
Well, great. I tell you what, awesome advice. And folks, if you're on Facebook, you just joined us. If you're wondering why you only see me, because we're live on YouTube at Peter Caliendo on YouTube again. Go there and subscribe. The show's live there. You can see both of us there. Hey, Kenny, you know, as I talked to you, and I've known you a long time, I would think, you know, the show's called Baseball Outside the Box, but I would think that in some ways you're more of a traditionalist when it comes to the game. As we talked about some of the rules, you know, you don't want the game changed as much, but here came Moneyball, right? And all of a sudden threw baseball upside down in some ways when it all started. And you got to play in the movie. Great movie, by the way. The book I've read, the movie I've watched 3-4 times. But what's your take on the whole concept? Because you know you seem to be more of a traditionalist with less change, but yet Moneyball changed the game a great deal, and now it's even changed it even faster in some ways. Give us your take on that, and we'll get right into Moneyball.
Well, what it's funny because I did a AT&T commercial, and the director Bennett Miller, who also directed Moneyball, and this was like almost a year before Moneyball, on the callback, he asked me, "What do you think of Billy Beane and the approach that he's making up in Oakland with the sabermetrics of baseball?" And I just right away I said, "It's ruining the game. It's
Right.
ruining the game because you can't really put a team together with a computer. The game has a heartbeat. You can take a scout like I remember George Genovese, who I loved as a scout and a human being, and we were very close up to the day he died. And George never carried a stopwatch. He never had a jugs gun. And he said, "I don't need a weatherman to turn my windshield wiper on." So he would put the gun down to see if a pitcher had an idea how to throw or something like that. With the Moneyball thing, and certainly when I signed with the Dodgers, I think the minimum salary in the major leagues was like $7,500 a year. And it was basically concessions, attendance, and parking, and with the television thing, the whole way the game has evolved, there's a lot more money involved. Having money and knowing how to spend it is two different things. And I think that when you look at the Oakland A's and what Billy Beane has done, I changed my mind in terms of what he's done, because he basically has put competitive teams together every year.
Absolutely.
They get in the playoffs, and there's a lot of people out there that can play baseball that may not, a lot of money is given away because a scout's hardest job today, I would think, is to go out and scout a kid either in high school or at college that's swinging an aluminum bat, and you say, how is he going to do with a wooden bat in his hand? You can certainly see talent and everything.
Great
and you
point.
can see gauging arm strength. I think a lot of the scouts get their hands tied by front office people that are saying, we don't want to sign a kid if he's not throwing over 85 miles an hour, which is a good indication of arm strength, certainly. Or we're not going to sign someone that doesn't run fast. It used to be running was a big deal. After Maury Wills broke the record for stolen bases and the Dodgers won a world championship with 300 hitter in Tommy Davis, and they had Koufax, Drysdale, Osteen, Padres, good pitching, solid defense. They would win games because they were fundamentally sound. The whole thing with Moneyball, when we started to shoot the movie, I remember in the scene with the scouts, I said, with our pitching, and they failed to mention this with Oakland, they had one of the best starting pitching staffs in baseball.
Absolutely.
So I said, we're going to lose Giambi, but we have a kid Pena coming up that's got pretty good power. He may not hit as high of an average, but he certainly has some power. Johnny Damon is a good, solid player, but something that we can replace. And Isringhausen is a guy with a good arm, but we can find good arms in our system. So I say we take a lot of that money, we put it into our player development and teach them how to play, and take the tools that we have and make them play the game the way that we feel is the right way to teach it. So having money doesn't mean that you can buy pennants or putting a team together, because you may take a kid, say, that grew up in Florida or Los Angeles, where there's a lot of pretty good players, and compare them to someone that might hit 500 in a state that doesn't even have high school baseball because of the weather, and they just have American Legion, and say, well, this kid hit 500. Well, who's he hitting 500 against?
Mm-hmm.
So it still comes down to a heartbeat and the instincts of scouting. I think that good scouts, if you untie their hands and let them judge talent based on, wow, this guy's a ball player. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that can go out and, like they'll run the 60-yard dash, because I guess that's the distance between home and second, or second to home. So somehow 60-yard dash gives you an indication, certainly, of speed. But there's track speed and there's baseball speed. So there's a difference between running a straight 60-yard dash or putting someone at second base and say, let's see your time rounding the bases, which is a technique.
Yep.
That's why I always like to train people on the bases. If we're going to run, we might as well. I've never seen a 100-yard dash in a baseball game. So I would like to condition guys. I learned that from Artie Harris, that I coached with a long time. And after playing, almost 10 years, I coached with Artie, and there was a whole different attitude of spending most of your practice time with things that happen most in a game. And what happens most in a game is ground balls. So we would train people on the bases. That's how we would condition people. Pitchers it was a commitment to running. I never punished anybody by running them, explaining to them that every time you run, you're putting money in the bank. So when you go out there to pitch, you're not writing a bad check.
Yeah.
I remember talking to the great Don Newcomb when he was saying how he was a runner and used to run all the time. And when he stopped running for, whatever reason, he was good friends with Mays and Aaron and these guys, and said, you have lost a little on your fastball. And he knew that was because he stopped the condition. His legs were not as strong as they used to be. So this once again, you go back to youth baseball, and there's very little conditioning, and you got to play this game with your body. You can't get around it. You got to play with the body. So you also got to let people know, just because you don't have power doesn't mean you can't be a good baseball player. So when we look at defensive alignments, we say our middle infielders are a whole different skill set than our corner people. Our outfielders, you may have a lesser arm in left field than you do in right field. You may have a center fielder that has great speed. So this is specificity on defense. Well, we have that same specificity on offense. We should have people that are good contact people that can move someone over, people that can handle bat with hit and runs. You got your bangers that you want to let the bangers be bangers. You're not going to let the guys that are setup guys try to hit home runs, and they're not going to be successful. But what they're successful for is getting on base, where the guys that are going to hit the home runs, let them go up there and be bangers. That's what they do. So I think that's a specificity on your offensive side, just like your defensive side. So understand what kind of player you are. And if you understand that that's the kind of player that you are, you got a much better chance of refining that and developing that into success, instead of trying to be something you can't do.
Yeah. And that's, I think, in some ways, if you look at some major league teams, I think that's hurting them, because they've got specific skill guys, and they don't allow them to use those skills. And I want to go back to Moneyball again, because it's interesting. You said that you told the director that possibly, that they're messing up the game in some ways, but you got the role. You got the perfect role then, because you got the role of Grady Fusion.
I was
right?
the antagonist,
yeah. He had to say right away, this guy's going to play Grady Fusion, as soon as you said that to him.
Yeah. That's exactly what I thought. I actually got a chance to talk to Grady, and I knew a couple of people I knew a lot of scouts, and they hired a guy, Mike Fisher, to be the technical advisor. And Mike was a football guy. He called me up and he says, do you know where I can find some baseball scouts? And I said, I can find you Custer scouts if you'd like. So, of course, so I brought about 30 scouts into a meeting. The first meeting with the director, Bennett, and Michael LaDuca and Brad Pitt. And I brought some guys, John Cole, Artie Harris, Phil Pote, some real scouts. And then we brought 30 people in a simulated meeting, and they actually saw the interchange of the scouts that are out there working right now, that are very knowledgeable baseball people. And they were amazed, and they didn't realize they actually changed the script around, because they had Robin Wright, very successful young star, and they realized that the real point of the movie was the scouts and what was going on there. So why take the off ramp to a domestic thing? Nobody really wants to hear about their domestic life. They want to see, how do scouts scout, what goes into it. And it is a hit and miss thing. You're trying to project talent, and you can look at the physical skill, but you may assign a kid that has great skills. He's very attractive at a workout. He runs good. He's got a good arm. They're throwing batting press, got some pop. You know, this kid, this guy's really good, but he can't stand being away from home. He's homesick, or he has bad personal habits, or he can't pitcher can't throw more than once a week. And all of a sudden you get into pro baseball, you're playing every day. So there's intangibles like that. And some good athletes. John Elway, Hall of Fame football player, signed with the Yankees as a pitcher, never got out of A-ball. Jason Sehorn, I sat with him at a friend's wedding. He said he signed with the Chicago Cubs, never got out of low A-ball. It's the hardest game in the world. So in Moneyball, I was explaining that the game has a heartbeat. And there are guys that you really don't look at them as saying, these guys are just absolutely no miss. They don't do anything plus, but they do everything well. They're fundamentally sound. And I think a lot of that gets lost in the formula now they have. You can't sign someone unless they throw over 95. We got to see how far someone hits the ball. They've gotten away from the speed, and now they're more into the outfielders that can hit a lot of home runs, because that's what fans want to see.
Yeah.
So and you take away a lot of the strategy of the game when you take away the manager's ability to manage based on his instincts and his knowledge of the game, where you have feedback from a lot of people. And you know, the more people you put in the kitchen, the more apt you are to screw up the meal.
Yeah. And that's why I love the Rays, because the Rays, you know, I think they were second or third in stolen bases. They're aggressive on the base paths. Hey, the other part about the show, about the movie, you know, the negative part has to be, and that unfortunately after the movie, a lot of scouts did get fired and released because they thought, well, we don't need scouts. And you brought up a great reason why we do need scouts, because you got to have that human element of it. The other part is the scene where all the scouts were were in that scene. Did that take a lot of takes? Because I think, did you ad lib any of that, or was it all scripted?
Aaron Sorkin is a, Academy Award winner writer. I don't care what you're writing. You got to know what you're talking about. If you haven't been to King Kong's Island,
Right.
you can't really write about it. Okay. So I knew what he was trying to say, but baseball has a whole different language. It's the old saying, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so Brad and Bennett especially, who was just a wonderful director, just so gifted. They pulled me aside about the third day of shooting, and I knew they weren't going to ask me what I wanted in my coffee, so I was wondering, God, did I screw up? Are they going to fire me? And they said, we didn't quite know what we were going to get out of the scouting thing, and this is really the crust of the movie. And so they cut a lot of the domestic thing between Robin Wright and the girl and Brad and the domestic stuff, and said, we're going to stay with the scouting thing because this is really interesting. We want you, Kenny, do your thing here. So it was certainly scripted, but they allowed me, and I do that anyway. Whenever I read a script, I'll see words that the writer might use that I might not use. And I think what they want more than anything, Brad just told me, he says, Kenny, go with it, man. Just go with it. I knew what he was trying to say. Let me say it. I speak the language. I was in the game a long time, and there's certainly a language. You can talk to someone and know whether they played or they've been around the game. You don't necessarily have to be a great player or a major league player to know and love the game and know about it. If you take the time to know the game and you're around it, you've been around the baseball, you love the game, and it's part of your life. Those are the kind of people that know the game. People that have been around the game and played the game, no explanation is necessary. People that haven't, no explanation is possible. So you can certainly understand and talk to someone and know whether or not they play. When someone says, I heard Greg Gutfeld the other day goes, well, this is like saying the guy in the major leagues is a pro and the other guys aren't pros. Well, no, if you're getting paid, you're a professional. So that really offends people that sign and play professional baseball. And everybody doesn't get to the big leagues. I mean, many come and few are chosen. It's a tough thing to get to. Then it's a tough thing to stay there. So when you're getting paid for your services, you are a professional. Now, the problem in Moneyball that they brought out is it's an uneven and unfair. Think if all teams were given a kitty and said, this is how much money you have, and everyone starts out with the same amount of money. Then it'd be interesting to see who would win.
Yeah. Well, so
what Billy Beane does, I think, is great. He goes to Kmart and Ross. He doesn't go to Neiman Marcus. He doesn't go to Gucci. The Yankees had a $230 million. He had a $39 million budget. So,
and Billy Beane understood, because Billy Beane was that #1 draft pick that did not pan out.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that helped him understand that there's players out there that were missing. You know, the other part about the movie, that scene about the scouts, since we're staying on that, you obviously have acted, you've been in movies, you've been in all kinds of stuff. So, you know, it's not a big deal in some ways to you. You've been through it, but some of the scouts, you know, may be the first time that they've been in front of a camera. But even though they know what they're talking about, how did they deal with it? Was it tough at the beginning for them? Because I can't see that being too easy right away.
I think the biggest thing you have to credit was Bennett Miller and Brad Pitt for creating an environment where people can put themselves in that environment and be themselves.
Just like a manager.
Exactly. So in terms of the baseball, you know, I think it's a lot easier to make an actor out of a baseball player than it is to make a baseball player out of an actor.
Yeah.
And so we had some actors in there that were good actors and came across, and we like you said, there were scouts that are not used to being in front of a camera, and maybe that concentration, it's all about concentrating. It's all about concentrating and putting yourself in that and letting it go. And I just took over and played a truculent Jonah Hill, for instance, off screen every day. I would just stare at him and he'd go, hi, Kenny, And so I said, here's the deal, buddy. I said, I have a buggy whip factory and you're coming in here with a gasoline engine formula. So
and he was great. I love that guy.
He did a great job of that. And he was, believe it or not, here's a guy accomplished, and he was feeling somewhat insecure because this was a dramatic role for him, and he's a comedic actor.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult when you get stereotyped and you're successful like he has been, but they'd had to change his name to Peter Brand because Paul D. Podesta didn't want to use his name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he didn't want to be portrayed as, well, physically, Paul D. Podesta is a slight guy. And
right.
Jonah was a whole different thing, just like Art Howe was played by the great Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yes.
So.
And then Ron Washington was played by who?
Brett, he was his friend of mine, actually. We worked on another 48 Hours together.
He was great. Remember the scene when they went to see the young man?
Yeah, he said it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, right. Asking about how to play first base.
And I kept going on about injuries because I know about injuries. It's like, he can't throw. Why do you like this guy?
Yeah.
His bat's so slow, it's got pigeon shit on it. Come on, what do you like this guy? I mean, and so this is the way when you see an old timer game in baseball, you see guys that you absolutely remembered and revered their skills, and when those skills are gone, and birthdays do that to everybody, so that's some of the mistakes that people have made in the past by holding on to guys too long and not replacing them. But the key is for a scout, and you definitely need scouts out there, because you can't just go by numbers. You can look at computers and see kids all over the United States and, oh my God, this guy hit 400 in Dogpatch, Arkansas. Well, then you sign him and he doesn't pan out because a scout may have gone out there and say, This guy's late with an aluminum bat. If we put a wooden bat in his hand, I don't see him producing. I don't see his skill level worth paying this kind of money for. And I think that's what scouts are a vital part of the game. And I think they should be recognized a lot more than they are.
Agree 1,000%, no doubt about it. Kenny, you've been great, man. I don't want to keep any longer here, but I just want to finish with this one. Give us something, a scene with Brad Pitt. Was there something that, as you guys were talking that you were laughing about? Because you had, sometimes, you're about to say a line, and then all of a sudden you look at the guy and you start laughing for some reason. Anything like that?
Well, it's funny because the scene where I got fired, I mean, that was
Yeah.
a 9-minute scene. That's an eternity in a movie.
Wow, 9 minutes to fire somebody?
No,
9 minutes.
This is when they were in there and they were studying game film. They were looking at Kevin Youkilis.
Yeah.
And said, this is the king of walks. And this guy, he waggles like a duck and blah, blah, blah. They don't like him. And I stick my head in, Billy, can we talk? Because he's including this guy and I should be in there because I'm the head of scouting. So
yeah.
Instead, he's got this kid that I don't quite understand this whole philosophical approach to the game of this guy that has never played a day in his life because you're taking Ray Charles duck hunting. This guy's never played before, and I'm an expert, and you're kind of cutting me out of the loop. So I confront him. Now, this day there was just Jonah, Brad, myself, and Philip C. Hoffman, and Philip was in the training room, just kind of like a fly on the wall, watching this exchange. And of course, Philip and I, in reality, I'm the head of scouting and he's the manager. We have a rapport. Now we really have something in common because we're seeing Billy Beane take an approach that we don't agree with because it's going completely against conventional baseball. So Brad, it's like 11 hours that we're in there and they shot over him on me.
Wow.
And then the following day they reversed it. And Bennett walked up and said, Brad is losing the energy that I want. So this time when you say, fuck you, Billy, I want you to put your hand on his shoulder like you're going to follow it with a right.
Oh.
Okay, no problem. And when I did that, when I was talking about you're going to get a job at Dick's Sporting Goods and you're
right,
blah, blah, blah. And then I put my hand and it's like a reaction was we both, kind of, it looked like we were going to go at it. And it was a total honest reaction. And that's the genius of Bennett Miller to get that. And that's what they used in the shot.
Did Brad Pitt know you were going to put a hand on him?
No. He said, should we tell him? I said, no, let's not tell him.
Oh, yeah, it's got to be more natural.
I did that in Brewster's Millions when there was a scene with John Candy and he was stroking me, telling me what a great player I was. And I saw your wife and she sure is an ugly bitch. And I'm just supposed to walk away. And I told the director, Walter Hill, I said, that dog don't hunt. I'm not going to let him show me up like that. He goes, well, Kenny, you can't hit him. So I got the two funniest people in the world, Richard Pryor out there on the mound, John Candy behind me. And I'm supposed to say, yeah, your wife's an ugly bitch and walk away. Oh. So I went to Walter and I said, listen, I said, people will stop their car to watch people argue. Right. If you're in a restaurant and two people get into a fight, the whole restaurant gets quiet, hanging on to their next word. And so he says, well, let's tell Richard and John. I said, let's not tell them anything. Let's just shoot one. And so you have all of these people that they hired from the unemployment office to make up the stands. Now, we rehearsed that several times and nobody knew it. So 3 camera shot. And when he called my wife an ugly bitch, I flipped the bat. I got right in his face. You fat just, just the kind of ream job you do with an umpire or something like that. And John Candy's got his eyes as big as a saucer. And when I called him a snack bar, it hit a nerve. And when everyone stopped laughing, the director looked over and saw Richard Pryor out there, bent over laughing. He goes, let's shoot another one like that. Richard timed the pitch better. And that's what they used. So Brad and Bennett, were, and it was really cool because the next day, Brad came in and he said, you didn't watch dailies. I said, I don't really like to watch dailies. I got a character in my head and I want to keep it there. And so he walked in and actually gave me a kiss on the cheek. And he said, you killed it yesterday. He goes, let's do mine today. So we shot over me and shot on him the next day. And he was so gracious and so good about creating a comfortable atmosphere. That's what's really important. I mean, guys felt like they were sitting at a meeting with Billy Bean and not with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And he was so gracious, and Bennett was so, I would say he was a Hall of Fame manager, making that team feel comfortable and play. That's what a good manager does. Baseball is played with relaxed concentration, and so is acting.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about that same thing. Folks, we're going to end it on this. I'm going to tell you a little story and then let Kenny go here. 1999, we both get picked to coach on the Team USA, and we're heading to Arizona. We're going to compete in the Intercontinental Cup the year before the 2000 Olympics. We've got pro guys on there, independent guys. And I meet Ken Medlock for the first time. We're in spring training now. We only got 3 days. We're in the clubhouse. Kenny's got a better memory. He's an actor. He's got a better memory than I do. But all I remember is that, we got on the conversation and Charlie Sheen came up because I went to Mickey Owen Baseball School. And as a 17-year-old, I was Charlie's counselor at the time and got to know him a little bit. Well, Kenny says to me, well, I know Charlie really well. I guess you stood up in his wedding and he can tell you now. And he says, let me call him. And he calls him on the phone. And he says, Charlie, we're in a clubhouse now. We got batting practice soon. Charlie, he says to Charlie, I got, Mickey Owen Baseball School. I got a friend of yours, from Mickey Owen and Pete Caliendo. Now, this is like 15 years later. So I get on the phone and Charlie says, hey, Pete, how you doing? I'm thinking, oh, yeah, right. He really knows who I am. He remembers. But all of a sudden, he starts rattling off all these guys at Mickey Owen Baseball Schools. He asks, how's Ken Rizzo doing? How's Dick Birmingham doing? I'm going, wow, he really knows his stuff. Ken, you remember that time in the clubhouse? If it wasn't for you, it was 15 years or even longer after I had been a counselor. I haven't seen Charlie in a long time. And because of you, I got a chance to talk to him on the phone. He would not get off the phone. Remember, we had to say, we got to go because we got batting practice. And he was going to go to Australia that year. I just wanted to thank you for that because it was a highlight for me just to get a chance to talk to him one last time.
Spending a lot of time with Charlie. Loves the game, fell in love with the game. His dad used to send him to the Mickey Owen School, couldn't get enough of it. And I think that when I was at Madison, I actually had a professional contract for him. They were going to sign him so he could say he played pro ball, because with all the success he has had as an actor, he would have given all of that up to play professional baseball, because that's how much he loved baseball.
And I remember because at Mickey Owen, we used to go to the pool and he used to ask me all the time, could I play college ball? And he was a pretty good athlete. He could play. He should have been able to play somewhere. Look at the movie he made when he was a pitcher. He was throwing the ball pretty good there.
I was a pitching coach for him. I was, as a matter of fact, when we went out there, they didn't understand that you can't just, okay, we're going to have him throw, and then we're going to reverse it, and then we're going to have him throw, and then I said, you can't keep warming him up. So I went out and found a little Nerf baseball that was made out of silk that looked like baseball. It was probably about the same weight as a tennis ball, and it had great movement when you threw it. It was light enough that when you threw it, it had great movement, because I said, listen, you got to film his pitching all at once and then shut him down. You can't warm up, because major league pitchers can't do that. If the rain delay goes more than an hour, they usually will not send the pitcher back out there.
Right.
So this is a trained arm. This is someone that if his arm goes down, then production goes down, because anybody that's ever had a sore arm throwing a baseball knows that it's not fun, and it alters your believability in throwing the ball. So he loved it. He couldn't get enough of it. He would, even when we went to shoot the Chase in Houston, I got the keys from Wayne Graham, who'd played for the Phillies back in the 50s. And he gave me the key to Rice University. Charlie would get through working all day, and it was furious. It was like 100 degrees for like 100 straight days without rain.
Wow.
And Charlie would call, hey, Ken, it's Charles, let's go hack, right? So we'd load up the cars and go turn the lights on at Rice University in the summer nights, and big ballpark, and we'd go out there and take batting practice, and couldn't get enough of it. He loved the game, and we would even he'd call up and we'd go down to wherever we could find a play, UCLA or wherever. We'd go out and take batting practice all the time. He loved it.
Man,
and
you're talking about after a full day of shooting. Those are long days.
Oh, long days. Yeah, long days out in the heat too. Wow. You walked outside the Omni, it felt like a microwave. It was just amazingly hot in Houston, Texas. And man, he goes, let's go hack. And so that was it wasn't preparing, it was a passion. He loved the game. He still does.
Yeah, matter of fact, the one last thing, I remember when he bought the tickets in Dodger Stadium in left field. He bought all
Yeah.
the tickets so he could catch a ball with his buddy in left field.
Yeah.
And it just, yeah, he's a great.
Well,
I
it's
would
funny.
assume.
We were at Rice University, and we had a guy from the Houston Astros doing batting practice. So I was okay. We'll do a base hit round. Anything that's not a home run is an out, right? And it's like 420 to center, and 350 down the line. Big ballpark, and the nights there were beautiful. It was terribly hot, but it was beautiful nights. And there was about a 10 to 12 mile an hour wind blowing in, and so I hit a ball out of the ballpark in left center field, and he was going, "Oh, you old fucker, I can't believe it." So, and he went and jumped the fence, got the ball, signed it, and say, "Way to diverge the boneyard at Rice University," and wrote it and signed it. I still have the baseball. I mean, that's just Charlie.
I bet he's a lot of fun. And I just want to say here, a couple friends of yours. One, before we close off, Ed Campagnello, Italian. Kenny needs to write a book on baseballism. He loved that you mentioned George Genovese, and also Pat Arter, obviously an agent, a good friend of ours, been around a long time in the game. He's been listening. He talked about Dodger Stadium. Kenny, man, this has been awesome. Hey, last thing,
Yes.
Charlie Sheen, his skill level when it came to hitting and pitching, where was it?
Like I said, but I was at Madison in pro baseball, and Madison was like that Northern League was like the old Coast League. You had 5 or 6 guys that were ex-big leaguers and some LS 4 or 5 players and rookies.
Yep.
Charlie would not have embarrassed himself going out there and throwing. He wouldn't have kept people up at night throwing in the high 80s, but as a left-handed hitter, he could swing the bat. You wouldn't be able to put him in a game and say he doesn't belong there. He's maladroit. He could swing the bat. I've gone to UCLA and he's hit balls a long way and took a lot of pride in it. I've seen guys that signed, and everyone does. You go to spring training and go, "Wow, how'd that guy get all that money?" Or "How'd this guy sign?" Or you see very few bad players and very few absolute great players. A lot of gray matter. So he did not look like someone trying to be a baseball player. He had good enough skill that his swing was good, his mechanics pitching was good, he could throw. It's like the size thing. If if LeBron James was 5'9", we wouldn't know who he is.
Right.
So it's the old story. Some people got more gears, but in terms of his ability, he didn't look like he didn't belong. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, no, and that's the thought I had, because I remember seeing him as a 15-year-old. He was a pretty good athlete.
He's a good athlete, yeah. And the good thing is you love the game. That's the one thing that if you can keep kids and love the game, that can be life-changing. That's the thing.
One of my goals, and hopefully say hi to him for me if you see him. One of my goals, would love to see him on the show. I'd love to get him on the show. Just be a lot of fun talking baseball with him. But that's another story, Kenny. I can't thank you enough, man. This has been great. We've gone way, way, way over the time that we needed to go. But I'm always learning something from you, man. I appreciate it.
Always good to see you. You want to? I'll leave you with a funny story about perception.
Finish.
The Pope comes into town. So he walks up to his limo driver and he goes, "They don't let me drive the limo at the Vatican. You think maybe I could drive the limo?" And the driver goes, "Oh, I don't know. If I did that, they'd fire me." And he goes, "Look, I'm the Pope and you're my driver. Who's going to fire you?" He said, "Well, since you put it like that, sure." So he hands the limo driver, hands the Pope the keys, and he jumps in the back of the limo. The Pope gets behind the wheel and floors it. He gets pulled over by a cop going 100 miles an hour in a residential. So the cop looks in and sees who's driving the limo. He goes, "Wait right here." So he goes, "Captain, I got a problem here." He goes, "What is it?" "I got a guy going 100 miles an hour in a limo in a residential area." He goes, "Well, what's the problem?" "Arrest him for reckless driving, compound the vehicle, and ticket him." He goes, "Well, that's the problem. This guy's big." He said, "You mean like the mayor?" He goes, "Bigger." He said, "The governor?" He goes, "Bigger." He goes, "Not the president." He goes, "Bigger." He goes, "Damn." He goes, "Who do you have?" He goes, "I think I may have God." And he goes, "What makes you think you got God?" He goes, "He's got the Pope driving for him."
Love it.
So this is the problem scouts have, trying to differentiate the Pope driving and the limo driver.
Limo driver. And it's not easy, folks.
Not easy.
All right, man.
Tough job.
Kenny, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, buddy. Always good seeing you. Say hi to Beverly.
I will, folks. That's Ken Medlock with Moneyball. And of course, you heard everything else. But I learned every time I talk to Ken Medlock, I'm always learning something, man. I can't take enough notes. Special thanks to Kenny for joining us on the show, and special thanks to our producer, Brian Kroc with the Lineup Media Group. And of course, special thanks to everybody in the U.S. and around the world who join us on the show. Remember, all we ask is go to YouTube. Peter Caliendo, hit that big red button. The big red button says subscribe on it. Hit it.
Say hi to all the baseball family out there. We're all brothers in the same. We love baseball fraternity.
Love it. Love it, Kenny. Thanks, folks, for joining us, and we'll see you on the next show.